Hi guys, so I think we're getting closer and closer to a general election because even GB News is now coming down on the side of defending the Union. Dan Wootton, who has a show on the channel, attacked Nicola Sturgeon, Scotland's First Minister and the leader of the SNP. Now, as the easing of the restrictions in Scotland and the rest of the UK have begun, there seems to be a shift in Scotland towards talking about independence. Now, Nicola Sturgeon mentioned this back in May. First deal with the pandemic, and then we'll start talking about a second independence referendum. However, both the Tories and the Labour Party at the time criticised her for always banging on about independence when she wasn't. Well, it seems Dan isn't too happy about the shift now towards Scotland becoming an independent country through a referendum, and he presents his own arguments as to why an independent Scotland would be a bad idea.
Tone-deaf Nicola Sturgeon is planning to kickstart her pathetic campaign for a second independence referendum at the SNP conference in September. And wait for this, she's going to use the COVID-19 pandemic to try and do so.
And why shouldn't she do that? She has been successful. She has been regarded as being successful not just in the UK but around the world in dealing with the pandemic. Much better, much more popular than Boris Johnson. So why shouldn't she do that?
Leaked documents to the Daily Telegraph have revealed...
The Daily Telegraph, okay, a pro-Tory, pro-Brexit newspaper.
Sturgeon will tell Scots that independence is essential to the country's recovery from coronavirus. Good luck with finding the evidence to back that one up. For a start, if they hadn't been part of the UK but somehow had remained in the EU, Scotland would almost certainly have relied on the EU's piss-poor vaccination procurement programme.
What? Like, look at the date. I don't know if you can see it on here, but this is the 2nd of August. This was filmed on the 2nd of August, not the 1st of January. Does Dan not understand that the Republic of Ireland has overtaken the UK in the rollout of the vaccine? Spain has overtaken the UK in the rollout of the vaccine. Denmark, I think, is close to doing so as well. Malta, Hungary, there are a number of countries that have already overtaken the UK. So when he says a piss-poor rollout, what is he talking about? Is he talking about before? We don't deal with the past, we deal with the present. Maybe Dan hasn't been briefed on current affairs.
Sturgeon is trying to cash in on the popularity she's gained during the pandemic.
Yes, because she's a politician. That's what politicians do. Once again, where the hell has Dan Wootton been over the last number of months? Does he understand that every day or every time Boris Johnson was in the House of Commons, he would, until recently, he'd stopped doing it for some reason, he would say how Britain had the fastest rollout of the vaccine in Europe. How his government rolled out the vaccine faster than any other country in Europe. He was doing that because he's a politician. That's what politicians do. Now, of course, Boris Johnson was wrong when he said that it was necessary to leave the European Union in order to do so. There are also other problems with, the UK being number 1 or number 2 when it came to the pandemic for other reasons, but we're not going to go into that. But that's what politicians do, Dan. If they think they can use something to their advantage, they're going to do it.
After being given this daily platform by the BBC from which to terrify her population every day.
What do you mean terrify? She was delivering okay, I forgot. Dan, I believe, is a COVIDiot. So I don't know how much he believes in regards to science when it comes to the pandemic. So Dan's opinions on the pandemic are a little bit out there.
But that popularity is fading fast. Scots should be far more terrified of the awful domestic programme that Nicola Sturgeon has overseen at home, including, by the way, new figures showing Scotland continues to have the highest drug death rate recorded in Europe. That's another catastrophic Sturgeon failure. That's what you won't hear much about on the mainstream broadcast media, and certainly not in the Scottish newspapers. And that's what we all need to start talking about when it comes to why going for a second independence referendum would be a huge mistake for Scotland.
Now, if you say that Scotland should not become independent because the SNP are doing a bad job, well, can we flip that and say, well, Scotland should become independent because Scotland is doing or the SNP are doing a good job? So if they're doing a bad job in some area and you're saying, well, they shouldn't become Scotland shouldn't become independent because of that, well, then surely you can also flip it and say, well, they should for things that they're doing well. But this is a distraction, because what the SNP are doing in Scotland is irrelevant to independence. If the SNP are doing a wonderful job, that's irrelevant to Scottish independence, because the SNP are not independents. Scottish independence is unrelated to the SNP. Yes, the SNP are using Scottish independence as a platform, but it's completely unrelated to the SNP. Now, what he's trying to do here is he's trying to say, look, the SNP, who are in charge at the moment, they're not doing a good job. Now, you can agree or disagree with him on that. But, Dan, that is irrelevant. Independence was a movement before the SNP. So you can't say Scotland shouldn't become independent because the SNP are doing a bad job. It doesn't make any sense. Now, it makes sense to some people who automatically don't like the SNP or Nicola Sturgeon or Scottish independence. So they use whatever arguments they can to say that Scotland shouldn't become independent. But criticising the SNP or Nicola Sturgeon is not an argument. You have to present arguments against independence, not arguments against Nicola Sturgeon and the SNP. I hope I've clarified this, because unfortunately people like Dan either don't understand or they pretend not to understand. And when they pretend not to understand, they transmit this misinformation, this ignorance, to the public. And then the public don't understand. Once again, what the SNP are doing is irrelevant to Scottish independence. The SNP could be an absolute disaster, but that would be irrelevant to independence. Now, how it could influence people to vote for independence is a different thing. I think the SNP have been doing a pretty good job. They have some blind spots, of course. They're people. They're a political party. No political party is perfect. Of course not. They're anything but perfect. But they seem to be doing a good job. Does that help the platform, help the movement of Scottish independence? I think so. Yes, it does. But it is not independence. That must be clarified. Let me know in the comment section, guys, what you think. As always, your comments are greatly appreciated. Thanks a lot. I want to say a big thank you to all of my patrons. You ensure that this channel continues to exist. I'm eternally grateful for all of your support. If you join Patreon, you will receive instant access to our Discord server, where we have both audio and video chats. You can chat with me and other patrons, where we discuss important and non-important issues. Becoming a patron per month costs about the same as a large coffee, so why not check it out?